The test of trust, the weight of suspicion. Vincent Shaw stood at the floor-to-ceiling window of his penthouse office, watching the city lights flicker like distant stars against the darkening sky. At 35, he had built an empire from nothing, his tech company revolutionizing how people connected across the globe. Yet here he stood, utterly alone, surrounded by luxury that felt as cold as the glass beneath his fingertips. "Mr. Shaw, the new housekeeper has arrived," came the calm voice of Thomas, his butler of 15 years. The elderly man was one of the few people Vincent still trusted, though even that trust had its boundaries. "Send her up tomorrow morning," Vincent replied without turning. "I want to see how she works when she thinks no one important is watching." Thomas hesitated at the door. "Sir, she comes highly recommended. Her references are impeccable." "So were Rebecca's," Vincent said quietly, finally turning to face his butler. The name hung in the air between them like a ghost. Rebecca, the personal assistant who had seemed so perfect, so trustworthy, until the day she disappeared with $3 million and confidential company files. That was 2 years ago, but the wound still felt fresh. Thomas nodded slowly, understanding in his weathered eyes. "Very well, sir. Will that be all?" "One more thing," Vincent called out as Thomas reached the door. "I want cameras checked in the main living area. Make sure they're working perfectly." A quiet arrival, Clara Bennett, carried her single-worn suitcase through the service entrance of the Shaw estate, her heart hammering against her ribs. The mansion was even more intimidating up close, all modern angles and pristine white walls that seemed to go on forever. She had cleaned houses before, worked in hotels and hospitals, but nothing quite this grand. "You must be Clara." Thomas greeted her with a gentle smile that immediately put her at ease. "Welcome. Let me show you to your quarters, and tomorrow morning I'll give you a proper tour." Clara's room was small but comfortable, far nicer than anywhere she had lived in the past 3 years. She sat on the edge of the bed, running her hand over the soft comforter, and allowed herself a moment of gratitude. This job, this chance, it was more than she had hoped for. She thought of her mother, gone now for 5 years, who had taught her that honest work and a kind heart were the only riches that truly mattered. "I hope I make you proud, Mama," she whispered to the empty room. The setup Vincent had planned everything meticulously. The next afternoon, he arranged himself on the leather sofa in the main living room, positioned perfectly within view of 3 hidden cameras. On the glass coffee table beside him, he had casually placed his wallet containing $500 in cash, his platinum credit cards clearly visible. Next to it sat his limited edition watch worth $40,000 and a small stack of $100 bills weighted down by a crystal paperweight. He controlled his breathing, keeping it slow and steady, the picture of someone in deep sleep. Through barely opened eyelids, he could see Clara enter the room, her cleaning supplies cart rolling quietly over the marble floor. She stopped the moment she saw him, her hand flying to her mouth in surprise. For a long moment, she simply stood there, and Vincent wondered what she was thinking. Would this be like all the others? Would she prove his cynicism justified? A different kind of thief. Clara's first instinct was to leave the room immediately, not wanting to disturb Mr. Shaw's rest. But the cleaning schedule Thomas had given her was very specific, and this room was supposed to be done before lunch. She bit her lip, deciding to work as quietly as possible. She noticed the items on the table, of course. How could she not? The money, the watch, the wallet, all left so carelessly in the open. Her chest tightened with an old familiar anxiety. She knew this test, had faced it before in different forms. Someone with money and power leaving valuables around the help, waiting to see if anything went missing. Instead of touching any of it, Clara cleaned around the table with extra care. She dusted the bookshelves, wiped down the windowsills, and carefully vacuumed the far corners of the room. The money and valuables remained untouched, but she felt their presence like a weight in the room. Then she noticed Mr. Shaw shiver slightly in his sleep. The afternoon sun had shifted, leaving him in shadow, and the air conditioning was running cold. Clara hesitated, her hand hovering over her cleaning cart. She should just leave, mind her own business. But she couldn't. Moving quietly to the linen closet in the hallway, she retrieved a soft cashmere throw blanket. She returned to the living room and gently, carefully draped it over Vincent's sleeping form, making sure his arms were covered. As she did, she noticed the fine lines around his eyes, the tension even in sleep. He looked exhausted, she thought, and somehow lonely despite all his wealth. "Rest well, sir," she whispered so quietly it was barely a breath. "You look like you need it." The watcher watched Vincent, felt the blanket's warmth settle over him, and heard her whispered words, and something inside his carefully constructed walls cracked. He maintained his breathing, his closed eyes, but his heart rate had increased. This wasn't what he expected. This wasn't the script he had written in his head. Through his security feed later that evening, he watched the footage again and again. The way she had looked at him, not with calculation but with genuine concern. The care she took with the blanket, the tenderness in her gesture, and most damning of all, the way she had completely ignored thousands of dollars in easy money sitting right there. "Who are you, Clara Bennett?" he murmured to the screen. Seeds of curiosity. Over the following days, Vincent found himself watching Clara more than he cared to admit. Not through cameras this time, but in person, from doorways and corners, where she wouldn't notice. He saw her stay late to help Thomas polish silver that wasn't her responsibility. He watched her leave her own lunch for the gardener when he mentioned forgetting his. He noticed how she saved the wilting flowers from the trash and tried to revive them on her windowsill. James, his best friend and business partner, noticed the change immediately when he visited for their weekly chess game. "You're distracted," James said, moving his knight across the board. "What's on your mind?" Vincent was quiet for a moment. "Do you believe some people are just genuinely good? No ulterior motives, no hidden agenda?" James raised an eyebrow. "This is about the new maid, isn't it? Thomas mentioned you hired someone." "I tested her," Vincent admitted, studying the chess pieces. "Left money out, pretended to be asleep, the whole thing. And she covered me with a blanket," Vincent said, still sounding surprised by it. "Didn't touch a single dollar." James smiled knowingly. So the great Vincent Shaw is discovering that not everyone is Rebecca. "Maybe," Vincent conceded. "Or maybe she's just very, very patient." But even as he said it, he didn't believe it. There was something different about Clara, something that made him want to know more, to understand what made a person so determinedly kind in a world that had clearly been unkind to her. A glimpse behind the curtain, it was Thomas who finally gave Vincent a piece of the puzzle. The butler appeared in his study one evening with a cup of tea and an unusual expression. "Sir, I thought you should know. I overheard Clara on the phone today. She was speaking with someone from a hospital." Vincent's hand stilled on his pen. "Is she ill?" "No, sir. She was asking about payment plans. Apparently her mother passed away some years ago, and there are still medical bills, significant ones." Vincent felt something twist in his chest. "How much?" "I couldn't hear the full conversation, but she mentioned over $50,000. She was asking if she could increase her monthly payment by $20 now that she has this position." $20. Vincent spent more than that on a single coffee some mornings. He thought of the hundreds sitting untouched on his coffee table, money that could have solved her immediate problems, that she had walked away from without a second glance. "Thomas," Vincent said slowly, "find out the exact amount and the hospital's billing department." Discreetly. "Yes, sir." Thomas paused at the door. "If I may say so, sir, I think you're beginning to see what I saw when I hired her. Some people carry light with them, even in darkness." After Thomas left, Vincent sat in his study staring at nothing. For the first time in 2 years, the walls he had built around his heart felt less like protection and more like a prison, and Clara Bennett, with her quiet kindness and careful hands, was holding a key she didn't even know she had. The test, he realized, had never been about her at all. It had been about him, about whether he could still recognize genuine goodness when it stood right in front of him. And against all his expectations, all his cynicism and carefully constructed defenses, he was beginning to believe again. But believing was dangerous, wasn't it? Believing meant vulnerability. It meant risk. It meant the possibility of being hurt again, and Vincent Shaw had promised himself he would never be that foolish twice. Yet as he climbed the stairs to his bedroom that night, passing by Clara's closed door, he found himself hoping that maybe, just maybe, some promises were meant to be broken. The truth unveiled. Watching in the shadows, the morning sun painted golden streaks across the Shaw estate's immaculate gardens. Vincent found himself taking his coffee on the terrace more often these days, a habit he told himself was about enjoying the weather. The truth, which he barely admitted even to himself, was that Clara tended the garden boxes there every morning at 7. He watched her now, kneeling beside the herb garden, her hands gentle as she pruned the basil plants. She hummed softly, a melody he didn't recognize but found oddly comforting. There was something almost meditative about the way she worked, completely present in each small task. "The rosemary is thriving," he said, stepping down from the terrace. Clara startled, nearly dropping her pruning shears. "Mr. Shaw, I'm sorry. I didn't realize you were there. I can come back later if—" "No, please continue," he interrupted, surprising himself with how much he meant it. "I was just noticing your work. The gardens haven't looked this good in years." Shy smile crossed her face, transforming her features. "Plants just need attention, sir. Someone to notice when they're struggling and help them flourish. It's not so different from people, really." Vincent found himself moving closer, drawn by something in her words. "And you think most people are worth that attention? Even when they've been neglected too long?" Clara looked up at him, and for a moment, her eyes held a depth of understanding that made his breath catch. "Especially then, Mr. Shaw. That's when they need it most." The investigation, Vincent wasn't sure when. His curiosity had turned into something more like concern. He told himself he was simply being a responsible employer as he sat in his office that afternoon, reading the report James had discreetly compiled. Clara Marie Bennett, age 28. Mother deceased 5 years ago after a long battle with cancer. Father unknown. No siblings. Previous employment at Riverside Nursing Home. Terminated under disputed circumstances. Before that, various housekeeping positions, all with excellent references except the last one. Vincent's jaw tightened as he read the details of her termination. Accused of theft, but never formally charged. A gold cross had been found in her cleaning cart, supposedly stolen from a patient. Clara had maintained her innocence, but the nursing home had let her go anyway, not wanting the liability. "Sound familiar?" James asked quietly from his position by the window. "Too familiar," Vincent muttered. He knew what it was like to be betrayed, but he was beginning to understand what it might be like to be the one falsely accused. "The medical debt? $53,412. She's been paying $200 a month for 3 years. At that rate, she'll be paying for another 18 years, not counting interest." Vincent closed the folder and stared at it for a long moment. "Thank you, James. That will be all." After his friend left, Vincent made a phone call, then another. By the time the sun set that evening, Clara Bennett's medical debt had been paid in full by an anonymous donor, and Vincent had made arrangements that she would never know the source. The storm 3 days later, a summer storm rolled across the Mee Valley with unexpected fury. Thunder shook the mansion's foundation as rain lashed against the windows. Vincent was working late in his home office when the power flickered, and then died completely. Emergency lighting kicked in, casting eerie shadows through the hallways. Vincent grabbed a flashlight and went to check on the household staff. Thomas was securing windows in the east wing. The cook had already gone home, but as Vincent passed by the conservatory, he heard something that made him stop. Crying. Soft. Muffled, but unmistakable. He pushed open the glass door and found Clara sitting on the floor, knees drawn to her chest, her whole body shaking. Rain hammered against the glass ceiling above, and lightning illuminated her tear-streaked face. "Clara?" He was beside her in an instant, the flashlight forgotten on the floor. "What's wrong? Are you hurt?" She looked up at him, and the raw pain in her eyes nearly broke him. "I'm sorry, Mr. Shaw. I'm so sorry. The storm and the darkness, and..." Her voice cracked. My mother died during a storm like this. The hospital lost power and the generators failed, and I was holding her hand when she couldn't finish. Her body was racked with sobs that sounded like they'd been held in for far too long. Vincent didn't think. He simply acted on instinct, pulling her into his arms and holding her as she cried. It's okay, he murmured into her hair. You're safe. I've got you. They sat like that for what might have been minutes or hours, time losing meaning in the darkness. Gradually her sobs quieted to hiccups, then to steady breathing. But neither of them moved to pull away. I paid my mother's medical bills for 3 years, Clara finally whispered against his chest. Did everything I could, but it wasn't enough. It's never enough. And then when they accused me of stealing at the nursing home, after everything I'd sacrificed, she laughed bitterly. I stopped believing that being good mattered. I thought maybe the world just punishes kindness. Vincent's arms tightened around her. And yet you covered me with a blanket. You left money untouched. You tend to gardens and help Thomas and save wilting flowers. He pulled back just enough to look at her face. Why? If you stopped believing kindness mattered, why do you still choose it? Clara met his eyes, and in the lightning's flash, he saw something fierce and beautiful. Because maybe I'm not kind for the world, Mr. Shaw. Maybe I'm kind for me. Because if I let bitterness win, then everyone who ever hurt me gets to decide who I become, and I won't give them that power. In that moment, Vincent Shaw fell, not slowly, not carefully, but completely and irrevocably in love with the woman in his arms. The confession. I know about the test, Clara said softly. Vincent froze. What? The money on the table, the watch. You pretending to sleep. She smiled, sadly. I've been tested before, Mr. Shaw. I recognize the setup. Shame flooded through him, hot and uncomfortable. Clara, I understand, she interrupted gently. You've been hurt. You needed to protect yourself. I'm not angry. You should be, he said roughly. You should be furious. I treated you like someone who might betray you, she finished. Like someone who needed to prove themselves. But here's what you didn't understand, Mr. Shaw. I wasn't proving anything to you. I was being myself because that's all I know how to be anymore. The rest is too exhausting. Vincent stood, pacing to the rain-streaked windows. The medical debt, the bills from your mother's care, they've been paid. He heard her sharp intake of breath. What? How do you? I paid them, he admitted, turning to face her. Anonymously, but I suspect you've guessed that by now. And before you refuse or feel obligated or whatever you're thinking, I didn't do it to buy your loyalty or your gratitude. I did it because... He stopped, struggling with words that had never come easily. Because $50,000 means nothing to me, but it meant 18 more years of struggling for you. And I couldn't stand that. Not when I could fix it. Clara stood slowly, her legs unsteady. Why? Because Thomas was right, Vincent said quietly. Some people carry light with them, and I've spent 2 years living in darkness, afraid of my own shadow. You reminded me that not everyone is waiting to betray me. Not everyone has an agenda. He took a step closer. You reminded me what it feels like to trust someone. Tears spilled down Clara's cheeks again, but these were different. I don't know what to say. Say you'll stay, Vincent said, and his voice cracked on the words. Not as my maid. I don't want you as my employee anymore, Clara. I want... He stopped, because wanting felt too big, too frightening. I want you to let me prove that I can be worth trusting too. The accusation, the charity gala, was supposed to be Vincent's triumphant return to society. After 2 years of relative seclusion, he was hosting again, and the mansion buzzed with caterers, florists, and dozens of staff preparing for the event. Clara had tried to fade into the background, but Vincent had insisted she attend as a guest. You're part of this household, he'd said firmly. You belong here. Now, dressed in a simple blue dress that Thomas had mysteriously arranged to appear in her room, Clara felt exposed and uncertain. She helped where she could, directing servers and ensuring everything ran smoothly. But she couldn't shake the feeling that she didn't belong among the glittering crowd. Patricia Greenwood arrived fashionably late, dripping in diamonds and disdain. She was an old friend of Vincent's late mother, and she wielded her connection to the family like a weapon. "Vincent, darling," she cooed, air-kissing his cheeks. "Such a lovely party. Though I must say, standards do seem to have slipped. I just saw one of the help wearing a dress that looked like it came from the guest wardrobe." Vincent's smile became dangerous. "That's because she's not help, Patricia. She's a guest." Patricia's eyes narrowed, scanning the room until they landed on Clara. "That girl. Really, Vincent, I know you've been lonely, but there are more appropriate—" "Careful," Vincent interrupted, his voice dropping to ice. "Very careful how you finish that sentence." But Patricia had never been careful. Later in the evening, she cornered Clara near the powder room. "I know your type," she hissed. "Pretty, helpless, looking for a rich man to solve your problems. But you should know, dear, that Vincent Shaw eats little girls like you for breakfast. He'll use you up and throw you away, just like he does with all his toys." Clara felt the old familiar shame rising, the weight of every accusation she'd ever faced. But then she remembered what she'd told Vincent during the storm. She wouldn't let other people's bitterness decide who she was. "I'm sorry you see the world that way, Mrs. Greenwood," Clara said quietly. "It must be exhausting to trust no one." She walked away with her head high, but her hands were shaking. The gift Vincent found Clara on the terrace after the guests had gone. She stood at the railing, looking out at the gardens bathed in moonlight. "Patricia has been spoken to," he said, joining her. "She won't be bothering you again." "It's fine," Clara said, but her voice was tight. "I'm used to it." "That's the problem," Vincent said roughly. "You shouldn't have to be used to it. You shouldn't have to armor yourself against cruelty just for existing." He pulled a small velvet box from his pocket. "I had this made for you." Clara opened it slowly. Inside was a delicate gold pendant shaped like a growing plant, tiny emeralds, forming leaves along its stem. It was beautiful and meaningful and clearly expensive. "Vincent, I can't—" "You can," he interrupted gently. "And you will, because this isn't payment or obligation or anything transactional. This is me telling you that I see you, Clara Bennett. I see your strength and your kindness and your stubborn determination to be good even when the world gives you every reason not to be." He took the necklace and fastened it around her neck, his fingers lingering on her skin. "And I'm asking you to stay, not as my employee, as—" he swallowed hard, "as someone I'm falling in love with." Clara turned to face him, her hand going to the pendant. "You're falling in love with me?" "Terrifyingly so," Vincent admitted with a shaky laugh. "And I know it's fast and complicated and probably inadvisable, but Clara, I haven't felt alive in 2 years. Not until you walked into my life and reminded me what trust looks like." She reached up, cupping his face in her hands. "I need you to understand something. I can't be your project, Vincent. I can't be the person you fix to make yourself feel better about the past." "You're not," he said urgently. "You're the person who fixed me without even trying. You're the person who made me believe in goodness again." "Then yes," Clara whispered. "Yes, I'll stay. Yes, I'm falling in love with you too. Yes to all of it." When Vincent kissed her under the moonlight, it felt like the beginning of something neither of them had dared to hope for. Trust, fragile and new, growing like the plant on Clara's necklace, reaching toward the light despite everything that had tried to keep it buried in darkness. 6 months later, Vincent stood in the conservatory, where he had found Clara crying during the storm. But today, the glass ceiling above showed only clear blue sky, and the woman he loved was laughing as she repotted orchids with dirt on her nose and joy in her eyes. "I've enrolled in night classes," she announced, not looking up from her work. "Business management. Thomas said I have a gift for organizing chaos." Vincent smiled, joining her at the potting bench. "Thomas is right, though you're also gifted at creating beautiful chaos." She swatted him with a gardening glove, leaving a dusty print on his expensive shirt. "I'm serious. I want to do something meaningful with my life. Maybe start a foundation for people struggling with medical debt. No one should have to choose between saving someone they love and destroying their future. I think that's brilliant, Vincent said, and he meant it. I'll help however I can. We can call it the Clara Bennett Foundation. The Marie Foundation, she corrected softly. After my mother. She taught me that kindness isn't weakness, even when the world tries to convince you otherwise. Vincent pulled her close, dirt and all. Your mother was wise, and I'm grateful every day that you inherited her strength. Clara looked up at him, her eyes bright with tears and happiness. You know what the best part is? I don't feel like I'm surviving anymore. I feel like I'm actually living. Me too, Vincent whispered. Because of you. In the garden outside, flowers bloomed in riot of color, tended by hands that had learned to nurture despite everything. And inside the conservatory, two people who had both been tested and found wanting by the world discovered that sometimes the greatest test is simply learning to trust again, in others, in goodness, and in the possibility that even the most broken things can grow beautiful and strong. Clara Bennett had walked into Vincent Shaw's life as a maid, tested for her honesty and found worthy. But in the end, she had tested him right back, challenging him to believe in something more than suspicion and fear. And they had both passed the only test that truly mattered, the test of choosing love even when it meant being vulnerable, choosing trust even when it meant risking pain, and choosing each other even when it would have been easier to remain alone. Some stories end with grand gestures and dramatic declarations. This one ended with two people covered in potting soil, laughing, in a sun-filled room, building something stronger than either had believed possible. A future rooted in truth, growing toward the light.